Okay.
Estamos listos.
Okay. Okay, we're live. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Thank you very much for being here. In the middle of rainy seasons, of hurricanes, of different vectors of vulnerability, we're so pleased and again so worried about these events that are happening worldwide, I just want to say that this event, this book launch, and I really want to thank Ajesha for being here, one of the editors of the book that I have here, with me, for this very important book that is trying to diagnose and to question this supposedly separation between the political and the humanitarian. This event is part of the Latin American and Caribbean Humanitarian Observatory, that is also part of this large project directed by Thea Hilhurst and Rod Mena, that's called Humanitarian Governance, Accountability, Advocacy, and Resistance. It's an ongoing project that is comparative between different. Actually, we have almost like 10 places around the world. Ranging from Colombia, Ethiopia, Congo, Holland. It's mushrooming all around the world. This idea of the humanitarian studies and all this. So this event, this book launch is part of this conversation. Both Ajesha has very interesting work on the last light on Mocoa a couple of years ago. Also Gabriela has a really interesting chapter in this book. And myself, I also have a chapter in this really interesting book that's trying to really think and really to bring conversations ranging from critical theory, from postcolonial studies, and also with the humanitarian studies field, which they say that is not so familiar in Latin America. This idea of the humanitarian studies field, I think that this book, and I think that our observatory is trying to bring to settle up these conversations of the humanitarian and critical studies field in the region. So really, thank you very much. I'm not going to talk anymore. I will just hand it to Gabriela, who is going to talk us a little bit about the event that we have today, about the organization, and also about the really important guests, friends that we have at this event. So Gabriela, I will hand it to you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank you for the patience, given that we started a little bit later than planned. But as Juan already said, this is going to be on the YouTube channel, and people could access it and watch our discussion afterwards. So, well, just to introduce myself, I'm Gabriela Villasitz Izquierdo. I'm currently a PhD researcher at the International Institute of Social Studies in The Hague, in the Netherlands. And I am very pleased to be part of this book project that started, I think, around 2021. Ayesha will tell us better about this, the story part of the book. But I am really glad that I was also able to contribute to this. So then we said, okay, let's organize something at the observatory and share what we have done together. And for me, then it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today. But first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping. It's this session is being recorded. But I would also like if people connected here would like to interact, they are also welcome to do so. And for Ayesha and Femke and Juan, who will be also having these two hats, right? Like moderating, but also presenting his own chapter. So I will ask you to do your presentation or sharing about your book in some 15 minutes, so we can just have a conversation about it. I would like to start by introducing the speakers for today. And I would like to start by Femke Mulder. Femke is a research fellow at the Department of Risk and Disaster Reduction at the University College London. Her research focuses on localization and community participation in humanitarian, disaster, and development contexts. Her interest lies in exploring if and how government agencies and non-governmental organizations collaborate with local communities to address complex challenges. Specifically, she examines the role of communication, knowledge management, participatory technologies, and data in these relationships. So if I can continue to our second speaker is Ayesha Siddiqui. This is the second time Ayesha has been with us in the observatory. So welcome again, Ayesha. Dr. Ayesha Siddiqui is currently Assistant Professor in Human Geography of Cambridge University. She is a post-colonial geographer whose research examines mainly how disaster risks are produced and lived on the margins of the post-colony. And last but not least, Juan Ricardo Aparicio. He's Associate Professor of the Department of Languages and Culture at the Universidad de los Andes, where he currently teaches both undergraduate and graduate courses on critical theory in social sciences, on the cultural studies, theoretical genealogies, and those traditions of Latin American critical thought. Articulated to these theoretical trajectories are his research interests on the humanitarian government, internally displaced persons, development social movements, the state, and the post-conflict scenarios. So, after this brief bio, I would like to give the floor first to Ayesha, who today is embodying the role of one of the book editors. And it would be great, Ayesha, if you could walk us through the process, the conceptualization of this book, what was the result, and everything else. So, Ayesha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Gabrielle and Juan, for putting this together. I'm so excited to be back. It's wonderful. Just also to say that Juan was telling us sadly about flooding in his house. I have a slightly sick child in the house, so I may have to nip out sooner than originally expected. So I apologize if I run. It's because I'm being summoned. Just by way of introducing the book as best I can, and also as somebody who, after a whole day of teaching, forgot her notes in the office. I wrote something down. I don't have it anymore, so I'm just winging it. What I really wanted to do was reflect on the book a little bit and be honest and kind of transparent about my role in getting us here. So I have to be really congratulatory to Isabel and Alice because they conceptualized the book. So Juan asked, how is the book conceptualized? Well, they did it. And I think Femke might have been part of the original panel where that they organized at the Humanitarian Studies Association conference. And they had some really great participants at the panel, and the panel was a great success. And so they decided that this was going to be an edited volume on depoliticization. And they even had the publisher lined up. They'd already spoken to Routledge. So I really got to piggyback on the brilliance of others, and I'm really grateful for that. Also, without kind of meaning to in any way make light, what I want to really emphasize is that the reason Alice and Isabel approached me was because they were like, we'd really like you to be part of this project with us. We can see you add value. And in one of the very early conversations that we had, but they were also kind of sussing me out. And so they were like, what do you think you can add to the project? And I was really honest. And I was like, look, I'm a geographer. I do post-colonial stuff. I don't really work on humanitarian studies. But what I can kind of promise to do in the book, and what I think the book would benefit from, is to keep questioning kind of the extent to which we're really being decolonial in our practice, in the way that we're thinking, in the way that we're presenting, in the way that, and that was so, and I could tell that I had got them. I had said the magic word, and they were in, and they were like, yes, we really want to work with you on this. And so this not just abstract idea of decoloniality, but really in spirit and in principle, it's run throughout the whole book. So to the extent that I am able to and qualified to talk about the book, it's pretty straightforward. There are these three. We're questioning this idea of depoliticization, right? And to what extent does depoliticization actually only further dominant agendas? So depoliticization is the way through which power gets to keep reproducing itself by saying, oh, but we're not political. That depoliticization is the politicization, is the political agenda of power. So it's presented in kind of three straightforward sections of the book. There's the section that kind of presents the paradigms through which depoliticization enacts and produces and reproduces itself in humanitarian action. There's the section which is on dilemmas, because it's not that black and white, right? It's not so straightforward for people who are in these complex situations in um, field offices or in places where humanitarian crises are taking place, who are being told to stick to the non-political, apolitical angle, but then they're also human beings, and they're also so it's there are various dilemmas which the second section kind of illustrates. And then the third section is the section on resistance, where we have both Juan and Gabriella's contribution. So, what are the ways in which people on the ground every day, through their peace communities, through their feminist approaches, are resisting ideas of depoliticization, right? So that's um, the actually hopeful note on which um, we kind of close the book. Um, and to come back to, and this is kind of where I'm going to leave things, but after making um, this point quite kind of clearly and in as much of a nuanced way as possible. When I talk about, decolonizing or decoloniality, or what am I really talking about, right? Like this is these days it's decolonize everything, and yet it means nothing, or it means so much that the meaning has been stripped away from the term altogether. And so, um, firstly, I think what is really wonderful and really, again, testament to how inclusive Isabel and Alice were from the start in this book, is that, being super academic is also a way of holding on to power, of being colonial, right? Of holding on to that power and being like, we're so abstract and theoretical and academic, and no one else can understand how deep our thoughts are, and that's a form of gatekeeping and keeping other people out. So this book has very actively sought interventions from non-academics and included people from practitioner backgrounds who've had an intervention for each of the section, who've contributed in various ways. Really challenging, but very central to this book was always this idea that we're going to have um, scholars from the Global South contribute. And this was, I mean, in some ways it's evident with Juan taking such a kind of lead role in organizing this for us, but we worked with people from the Global South whose contributions eventually didn't even make it in the book, because the reality is that there is structural inequality, right? When you're working in a university in uh, uh, a global South country, and you have 6 courses to teach, you can't really sit and write and have deep thoughts about what chapter you are going to write next. So I worked quite hard with a particular global South scholar, and eventually at some point she left her contribution, and we didn't continue anymore. So there is still structural coloniality where the lack of resources make it really difficult for global South scholars to contribute. And on the process of decoloniality within the book, I also really appreciated the way when we've incorporated food banks in the UK as part of humanitarian action, right? This isn't just something that happens out there, that the West goes to do out there. I mean, there are plenty of problems within countries in the global north. The UK epitomizes many of them. So this isn't the West going out to teach the rest. This is very much about understanding the complex processes that create humanitarian um, conditions, but then also depoliticize them. And r- not now on process. The last thing I'm going to say on content is that when we were writing our conclusion, we were quite critical of the way that kind of Western liberalism goes around, and hence the humanitarianism of liberalism goes around telling people it's got all the answers, right? And that was even before we wrote our thoughts, our conclusions, our reflections, etc. Before the current genocide had even started to unfold in front of our eyes, and we are still told that we must remain apolitical in the face of this kind of not structural, this kind of devastating violence, right? We're not allowed to have a position. So um, if this book has to mean anything, and if our or each of our contributions have to mean anything, we have to be able to say that there is a genocide unfolding in front of our eyes. It has been for over a year in Gaza, and that in fact um, liberalism and its form of humanitarianism has very deliberately and has very actively chosen to keep its gaze elsewhere, right? It's not important that these people are dying. So I think if we don't make our scholarship kind of call out the hypocrisies within these forms of humanitarianism and liberalism, then what's the value of that scholarship to begin with, right? So thank you all for your contributions. They've made the volume so much richer. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ayesh. This has been really inspiring for me, especially the last part in which you talk about how scholarship has to be really challenging and has to call out all of what's happening, especially what we are seeing day after day. This is non-stopping. So thanks for bringing this to the conversation, but also thanks for guiding us through the process. And even if you were not the mastermind, so to say, but you were crucial in the whole process. And also I can say from very first as a witness, because you supported my own process. So thanks also for that. Now we are moving to one of the contributors. So I would like to give the floor to Femke, who contributed with a chapter under the section 1, which is Depoliticizing Paradigms. And her chapter is entitled Resilience versus Surveillance Humanitarianism: How Two Conflicting Paradigms Depoliticize Aid and Affirm the Top-Down Status Quo. So, Femke, the floor is yours.
Can you see my screen? Because I like to show some pictures rather than just have people stare at me.
Yes.
Awesome.
Maybe you can put it on presentation mode?
Yeah. How do I do that?
You see on top, on the left, there is a little slideshow icon. Top left.
Left. Wait a second.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Does that work? Can you see the whole thing now?
I think it's taking its time. Yeah, we can see it, but it's on, well, it has a different format, but I think we can see it.
Okay, brilliant. It's just because otherwise I'm just going to be on the screen, and that's just so.
Amazing.
I used AI to generate some pictures to illustrate the sort of the talk. So my name is Femke, as you mentioned, and my chapter indeed looks at two paradigms in the humanitarian sector: resilience humanitarianism and surveillance humanitarianism, focusing on how those two paradigms drive the depoliticization in the humanitarian sector. So, just to clarify, when I say depoliticization, it's not about party politics. It's not about choosing one side over another. It's about hiding power imbalances in humanitarian aid. So I'm very much talking about the structure, the status quo, the big setup that we have, that through which humanitarian aid is organized around the world. So I'm looking at different reasons for hiding power imbalances in humanitarian aid as a result of these two paradigms. Looking at strategic reasons why humanitarians feel that they need to hide these power imbalances, routine managerial reasons why they feel they need to do that, and also why people are sometimes coerced into hiding power imbalances. So I initially wanted to call the chapter Feeding the Monster While Trying to Change It, but I was told that's not very descriptive. So I changed it to Resilience versus Surveillance Humanitarianism. But I picked the title initially because I attended a workshop back in January 2018 with leading INGO aid workers, and it was about participatory action research in the humanitarian sector. And everybody there wanted to reform the system. Everybody there wanted to see a shift towards locally led approaches instead of outsiders, in the global north, setting the agenda. And what struck me most was the tension that everybody felt. Um, Everybody there was deeply invested in reform, but they were frustrated, disillusioned almost by the system's hierarchical structures and norms getting in the way. Like, they talked about the need to meet the expectations of big donors, of governments, of established aid agencies, and they felt stuck in following top-down processes like top-down monitoring and evaluation and practices that didn't actually help them make a real impact. But that was all about ticking boxes to satisfy the powers that be. So, and at one point, one of the aid workers summed it up perfectly. In my opinion, like they said, it feels like we're feeding the monster while trying to change it. So, capturing the dilemma that they wanted to reform the humanitarian status quo, but they were trapped in feeding it. They were trapped into upholding the very norms and processes that they wanted to dismantle. So I wanted to understand why that is so. So my chapter looks at neoliberalism. As everybody knows, neoliberalism, a discourse that promotes governance and management based on free market principles. It's incredibly contradictory. It's full of contradictions. And in the humanitarian sector, it's given rise to two conflicting paradigms. So on the one hand, you have resilience humanitarianism, and on the other hand, you have surveillance humanitarianism, and both have neoliberalism at their source. So the surveillance paradigm focuses on quality control in aid, as well as the security concerns of donors and states. So it promotes a technical, managerial approach to aid, and it drives the ongoing rationalization and professionalization of humanitarian work with its focus on clear guidelines, norms, standards, contracts that must be followed. On the other hand, You have the resilience paradigm, which emphasizes fostering community empowerment, self-reliance, local ownership in aid. And this paradigm reflects a technique of neoliberal governance called responsibilization, which involves transferring responsibilities that were traditionally held by governments, such as disaster management, to individuals and local communities. Now, the issue is, when it comes to managing humanitarian projects, is that these two paradigms pull in opposite directions. They're in direct conflict with each other, because the resilience paradigm obviously emphasizes local ownership and leadership, whereas the surveillance paradigm demands external monitoring and external control. Both paradigms shape and are shaped by the views of major funders, again, donors and states. So to win contracts, to win money, humanitarians have to design project proposals that talk to both paradigms, that meet both sets of ideas, both sets of criteria, even though they pull in opposite directions. So typically aid workers do this by crafting their project strategy around resilience, so focusing on, empowering local communities. But then they translate those strategies into implementation tools that specifically facilitate external surveillance and control. So you end up with project models that are completely inconsistent and in fact completely contradictory. Like, the project models demand that humanitarians foster local resilience and foster local self-reliance through external monitoring and control. So what happens in practice is that you get depoliticization. So this chapter I wrote is based on research I did into localization and community participation in the humanitarian sector. The specific case study that I use in the chapter is a participatory nutrition project in Ethiopia, which I refer to by the pseudonym Empower, because it's all about empowering women and girls. So in the autumn of 2018, I was doing participant observation at the field office of an INGO in Ethiopia. The organization ran the Empower project in partnership with the federal government and local organizations. It focused on addressing gender inequalities at the local level, because it saw those as the key factors to contributing to malnutrition in women and children. And the idea was to empower women to become self-reliant in nutrition and food security, to take responsibility for improving the health and development of their communities. And to put this into action, women volunteers in the community were given leadership roles like peer facilitator, rotating fund manager, and model farmer. So all that is in alignment with the resilience paradigm: empowerment, local responsibilization, and resilience through local leadership. But in the implementation, things didn't work out that way. Like all aid projects, most aid projects did one had strict requirements to meet, which were dictated by its donors and its government partners. It had to deliver specific activities, outputs, and outcomes by certain deadlines to certain standards. And it required professional expertise in NGO project management, which the women volunteers in the villages didn't have. So to make sure that everything stayed compliant with donor requirements and government requirements, the project brought in community mobilizers. And their job was to control the project implementation at the community level. So what this meant was that the women volunteers had very little real autonomy. So even though the project strategy was specifically to empower them to take ownership, in practice, they were empowered to follow instructions from above. And that is the inevitable result of a contradictory project model, whereby the strategy demands granting autonomy to facilitate local leadership and local ownership, but the project implementation demands external top-down control. Now, NGOs gloss over these inconsistencies when writing grant proposals and reporting on projects because they need the funding. So pointing out the contradictions in your own project does not help you get funding. And because the contradictions center on power and responsibility, glossing over this is a form of strategic depoliticization. It's a strategic reason to gloss over power imbalances. However, coerced depoliticization also played a role because the female volunteers in the Empower project were absolutely vital to its strategy. In addition to supposedly implementing the project activities, they were the project's key deliverables in a sense. Like the success of Empower dependent on these women being seen as empowered, self-reliant, taking ownership of strategies to manage drought and malnutrition. So these women, like their main role in the project was to perform what was called legitimacy work, like guided by the community mobilizers. Their main role in the project was to create visual and performative demonstrations of empowerment, ownership, self-reliance during monitoring visits by NGO headquarters and local government bodies. So essentially, their main role in the project was to help the project manage its image and showcase its impact. So there was a lot of pressure on them to act as if they were, actually leading the project activities, as if they were, empowered, self-reliant, etc. And hide the power imbalances that actually existed between them and the NGO implementing the project, and the whole chain globally within humanitarian aid. So they were effectively coerced into hiding these power imbalances, into depoliticizing this aspect of the project. But there was also a more direct form of coercion in the context of the Empower project. As I mentioned, the project was run in partnership with INGOs, the federal government, and local partners. And it operated through structures that the government had set up to facilitate community-level mass volunteering. And that structure was called the Women's Development Army. So the women who volunteered for the project were referred to as army leaders. So they had important responsibilities like teaching other women about nutrition and gender and livelihoods. And they were expected to lead by example and take ownership of their family's health and development. But the government didn't just use the structures of the Women's Development Army to facilitate community-level volunteering. It also used the same structures to monitor the communities for security threats. So the army leaders were expected to keep a keen eye on their peers to identify troublemakers, and to ensure that the women in the community upheld the right beliefs and behaviors. So while it was a structure set up to facilitate community-based aid, it was also used directly by the government for surveillance and control. So these are two aspects of humanitarian surveillance. So you have the monitoring for correct behaviors, which is coerced depoliticization. And then you have the monitoring for project quality control, which is routine managerial depoliticization. So adding to that, this is the final point. So the focus of Empower, as I mentioned, was to tackle malnutrition amongst women and children during a prolonged drought and during conflict. Now, obviously, the root causes of the food crisis in the project target areas were very complex, all the way from global level issues like climate change to national political instability to local tensions over access to water. But here's the thing. When the project was being designed in partnership with local stakeholders, because it was a participatory co-creation project, none of these politically sensitive core issues were included in the project analysis, in the strategy. And this was done for a strategic level by people for strategic reasons at all levels. As I mentioned, it's a consortium from international NGOs to the federal government to local partners. And they just wanted to stay clear of any issues that might create conflict within the group. So instead of focusing on broader systemic issues, the focus landed on something that had already been determined to be one of the priorities of the powerful consortium members. So community level gender inequalities requiring women's empowerment. Now, not to say that that didn't play a role in the nutritional challenges that women faced, but by only focusing on that issue, by only framing the problem in those terms, the problem was able to present a solution at the community level, requiring community level action, then as opposed to broader systemic political reform. And it's also allowed a strategy to empowering women to basically be to be approached as a straightforward technical challenge, something that you could plan, deliver, and measure in through implementation. So that's an example of routine managerial depoliticization of aid, because the project goal of empowering women so as to improve their nutritional status was translated into quantified outputs like running 465 training sessions and quantified outcomes like achieving a 30% improvement in nutritional outcomes against baseline to be delivered to certain standards within a fixed timeline by the end of year 3. So something that's inherently political, like community resilience, was rendered as a purely technical challenge. And those are the 3 ways in which the 2 paradigms contribute to the depoliticization of humanitarian aid in the sector. So yeah, thank you for your time. I've got the sniffles, so I need to blow my nose.
Many thanks, Femke. This was actually really interesting. I haven't been able to read the fellow contributions of the book, but this was really interesting for me, and somehow it is connected to what I wrote about, right? I also wrote about women and displaced women and their role as political agents. And when you were just talking this last part, I was like, oh, this is somehow related. And I would really like to engage with that in the discussion. So thank you very much. And now we have Juan Ricardo Aparicio. He is going to present about his chapter under Section 3, Resisting Depoliticization, and the title of his chapter is Ruptures and Contingencies in a Bottom-Up Humanitarian Assemblage, a History of Peasants, Territories, and Displacement in Colombia. The floor is yours, Juan. Oh, we can hear you. We can't.
I
You
think
lost
Juan's
the
on mute. No,
yeah, he lost the mute button. Why? What's happening? Or someone just forcibly muted you. Okay, maybe I can. Maybe someone from the.
Okay,
Amazing.
thank you much. Okay, can I be also a presenter, please? Because I'm going to show also some images. Okay, thank you much. Again, Ayesha, thank you much for inviting me to this really interesting book. Thank you, really interesting chapter. I really have to read it. I have to say that my chapter and actually my trajectory, I am coming late to the humanitarian field, no? That means that I'm trained as an anthropologist, no? And also working nowadays in the culture studies field, no? And I'm arriving to the humanitarian field, no? I want to say this because I think this book really is actually articulating different theories, different critical theories in a very, very interesting way for me. For me, my chapter is very trying to bridge 3 conversations that are very interesting. First is the Latin American and Caribbean critical thought, no? I'm thinking here a constellation of thinkers, not only academics, I want to say thinkers, no, that actually have thought about Latin America and the Caribbean within the world system and the whole issue of the coloniality of being and all these really interesting conversation, no? Second, I'm also thinking here about cultural studies and especially the relation between culture and power, because I think that one of the things about the political and the depolitical is this idea of the technocratic, no? That very much as Femke really firmly teaching, many of these techniques, no, are being thought or being showcased as non-political, no, and that is very cultural in a way, no. So I think the relation between the culture and the political. And thirdly, I am an ethnographer. So let's say I'm very, very interested, like in deep knowledge, in deep knowledge about the everyday life, no, about how people live, how people negotiate, no, how people resist more or less these designs, these government designs that are trying to cope with these challenges and all this, no. So I'm going to show okay, Jimmy, can you please give me permission to show a PowerPoint internet, please? A small presentation I want to do here. Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, it will happen. So I will tell you a little bit about this chapter. Okay. Let's say that my chapter is the product of what I like to think, and it's also very Latin American and Caribbean, no? Not only about a community that I'm really working with, but also I like to think about us as the acompañamiento, meaning I'm being able to talk, to conversate, to more or less to raise solidarity with this very interesting collective that I've been working with, peasant collective, no, in the Urabá region that is in the northwestern part of Colombia, no, in the border with Panama. Just a little bit background. This community, officially community, declared itself as a peace community in the year 2005, if 2004, no. Basically, they were peasants that were being victims of conflicts, of armed conflicts in this particular area of Colombia, no. They were thought as enemies by both the paramilitary and the army, no? They were displaced and all this, no? And what is interesting is that in the middle of this really, really difficult scenario, no, the church came here, and the church is really an important actor here, no? And they basically they started the conversation with this displaced person, no, to actually to come up with a very interesting idea of declaring themselves as a peace community as such, no. So they declared themselves as a peace community, meaning two things: they were going to live by a specific code of conduct, no, meaning they are going to participate in communal economies, in this sort of like alternative economies, no. They were going to live in particular ways in this territory, no. Very important. They were not going to escape to the cities, no. And that is something I want to really think about this. Most IDPs, the internally displaced persons in Colombia, no, they usually fled to the city, no, to find escaping from armed actors and all this, no. But this community did do two very interesting things. First, they decided to stay in the territory, no, and that's for me the political starts in that decision, no, in the decision to stay in the territory and not to escape to the city. So first of the things, this is a community that is trying to repoliticize, no, the idea of victimhood, no. First thing is that they want to stay in the territory, no. Second, very interesting, they never intended to be part of the humanitarian governance, meaning that they were not registered as victims, no. They do not accept humanitarian aid from the state and of this, no. Remember that in Colombia, the state has been centralizing humanitarian action since in the 1990s, no. So they say that they have rejected not only being registered as IDPs in the state lists, but also actually of receiving aid from the state, no? So basically my chapter is trying to concentrate in this local history of repoliticization of the humanitarian, no? How local communities in the sense peasants, no? How do they antagonize, no? With the idea of the neutrality of the humanitarian, no? Meaning that they want to create a space of difference, no? In which victims do not behave in the proper ways as those that Femke was specifically talking about this. So these are victims that are rejecting, no, this idea of behaving well, no, of receiving the humanitarian gift, no, and more or less giving thanks to all this to the government and all this, no. They are created really particular ruptures. For example, in the year 2005, there were some negotiations between the government and the peace community, no, about trying to recompose what Ajesia has worked so much about this social contract, between the state and victims and all this, And suddenly there was a huge massacre, one of the most deadly massacres of one of the leaders of the community and also his sons and all this, And that massacre was very much, and there's a lot of investigation going on. No? That massacre was perpetrated by the state agencies and all this, So basically, the community decided to create a rupture with the state. They cleared a rupture with the Colombian state, and actually they voluntarily displaced 500 meters, like 1 kilometer along the road, and they created, a self-managed camp, IDP camp in the middle of nothing, So again, first of all, the decision to not be part of the humanitarian bureaucracy, and also the decision to not live side by side with the perpetrators of this massacre, for me has been two important moments of rupture between the peace community and the government state, And for me that is crucial because, for example, in many of the meetings that I have with embassies and all this with the community and the community, there's an ongoing idea about framing the community as very orthodox and actually very terco. How we say terco, Gabi? Terco.
Stubborn?
Very stubborn, in which the embassy said to me, look, this is the time of the victims, government wants to help you, this, and they remain stubborn, So for me, this stubbornness is really interesting for me. It really talks about the repoliticization of the humanitarian, trying to counteract the idea of the humanitarian gift, of the humanitarian aid, and trying to create. And I'm thinking about Foucault and his idea of heterotopy, Try to think a different territory, a different set of social relations, even a different sovereignty, because more or less in these territories of the peace community, in this code of conduct, for example, they agree not to give any information to any of the armed actors, meaning the guerrilla, the economic government, and the state. Second, they reject to be part of the humanitarian gift, and that means to be part of all the victims' law. And now this procedure in which the state is actually paying victims, actually repairing victims for all what they have lived in all this. So I can tell you more about this, but basically my chapter is about a very local, small history, of repoliticization, by a really interesting and creative peasant organization, and that I like to call it as an assemblage, because more or less this is not a collective. This is not like located only in this place, but also an assembly, meaning that also this is an assembly between peasants, for example, because they define themselves as a non-combatant peasant community, So they means the local and the global are not usual categories. I like the category of as an assembly, That is combining vectors, discourses, practices, and all this. But I'm trying to just look at this as a very interesting example about the repoliticization of the humanitarian from below. And I will leave it like that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juan. I don't know what happened. We couldn't see your slide, your
Just
pictures.
imagination. I have really fantastic slide, but just imagination. Sorry for this.
It's okay.
I mean,
Thank you so much.
going back to the usual storytelling.
Yeah, and you caught our attention, so I think it was okay. Thank you so much. It's been really insightful to hear from the three of you. And what I hear from these three interventions is different perspectives on the politicization from the broader paradigms that Femke was somehow relating in the chapter, but also from very situated experiences of people in communities in specific parts of the world, as Ethiopia and Colombia. So I would really like to have a conversation also with the people who are present now, not the ones that are are watching us live, but maybe the people who are actually joining in the Zoom meeting. And I don't know if someone has a question, but while they think a little bit, I have a question that emerged from what you were saying, and maybe this is for the three of you, because I've been hearing you say, what is the possible relation between depoliticization and legitimacy? And legitimacy by whom, right? Maybe by the humanitarian actors, by the communities, by the government. So this is kind of my first question to all of you. But also, of course, my intention is to give the floor to the people, and maybe we can have some minutes to exchange, and then people can just go on. Does someone would like to start with the question I asked, or maybe we move on?
I'm happy to start. I mean, in the established humanitarian sector, which is completely commodified, humanitarian aid is completely commodified. And there's a very small number of donors that control 95% of all humanitarian aid. It's really concentrated into the hands of an oligopsony, like a small number of powerful actors, and they get to completely determine legitimacy in terms of what proposals and reports need to conform to. So in terms of controlling the funding in humanitarian work, legitimacy linked to that is controlled by a very small group of people. Now, obviously, that does not in any way translate to legitimacy from as perceived by the actual people who are the recipients of the humanitarian aid, because you have this weird setup in the humanitarian sector whereby they're not if you look at it as a marketplace, and I think given how commodified humanitarian aid is, it makes sense to look at it in terms of market dynamics. And because they're not the buyers of humanitarian aid, they have no contractual power over the suppliers, which would be the NGOs, the operational people. The power relationship is between the buyers, i.e. the donors, and the providers, i.e. the NGOs, and then the people are just completely separate from that. So, so if through a market lens, which is a power lens, like I think that capital influences power, like they're just hand in hand. So, in that sense, legitimacy is a very small group of organizations that determine that. But that's from the top-down perspective, obviously.
Amazing, thank you. Maybe Juan or Ayesha, do you have any opinion on this question? And then maybe we can move to Juliana's remarks. Again, you're muted.
In the meantime, can I just apologize and run, because it's time now where I have to be available at home. So I'm going to just say with apologies, I would have liked to stay and continue with the discussion, but I am being summoned. So I hope you have a really good dialogue. And yes, thank you again for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ayesha, for being with us today, and I hope that everything goes well at home.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so Juan, what happened with your microphone? Okay, I clicked this the first time, and
I have
yeah.
it. I have it. Okay.
Okay.
Just wanted to say something about legitimacy. I think also it's something that has to do with what Ayesha was pointing about, the relation between liberal thinking, modernity, and the humanitarian. I think that's a key. And actually that's also with neoliberalism, I think was saying, So in that sense, I think what is happening nowadays is that we are seeing, for me and for many people, critical thinkers and moments and others, the bankruptcy of that legitimacy, that is actually what is happening in Gaza and in other parts of the world since a long time ago. It's actually that basically the social contract the supposed social contract that brought legitimacy to the humanitarian law is being contested freely, and all these kind of things. No. So in that sense, what I'm saying is that we are seeing next to what Fenke was precisely showing us, no, about this portrayed neoliberal legitimacy, no, that very much we know about this, no. The lists and the signatures and all this are very much what counts as as a successful project nowadays, no. So in that what I think here is that from the local, no, we're seeing like efforts to think legitimacy in other terms, no. So precisely what we have to do, precisely, and I think that Gabriela, I think that actually your chapter about feminist care and solidarity is trying to think about legitimacy, not from the liberal consensus or from the numbers of the neoliberal consensus, no, but actually from other terrains. Linking is very much to care, to feminist struggle, and that kind of thing. These are all very exciting, say, like new direction, no, to the richer nowadays, no. I see that also Jose Luis is here, but just to say that precisely, Gabriela, I want to say that we have seen clearly the bankruptcy of that legitimacy, and perhaps the co-creation or the emergence of other ways of thinking legitimacy from below.
Yeah, so super clear. Thanks, Juan. It's a very long question, though. I think we can just have another webinar about legitimacy. But for the sake of time, if it's okay with Jose Luis, I would like to address Juliana's question first, which is in the chat, and then we can go with you. Because Juliana cannot use the microphone. So there is, I might read it really quick so you can address it. So this is for Femke, and this is, have you found experiences in which addressing a depoliticized approach might be part of the negotiations and intended strategies to preserve and protect bottom-up communitarian agendas? Is it possible amid the humanitarian field contradictions? And you are muted as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the question, in which addressing a depoliticized approach might be part of the negotiations. So to explicitly politicize it, I mean, it is incredibly challenging. Like, I mean, people have to, the key thing is to identify people in powerful organizations, donors, what have you, who are open to this. They tend to be in a minority. They tend to not have the power to make things happen, but they do exist. It's incredibly challenging. If you look at how much money goes to actual locally led NGOs and communities as a proportion of the entire humanitarian budget, it's tiny, even though they made big promises in 2016 saying, oh, we're going to, shift the power, and it's absolutely nothing has happened. So it is incredibly challenging. That there are definitely people in this sector who absolutely wants this, who absolutely wants an intervention that actually works, which means not, glossing over power imbalances, but actually systemically doing something that changes people's systemic vulnerability. So not a technocratic approach, but it is incredibly difficult. Is it possible amid the humanitarian field contradictions? It's almost impossible if you are a local organization or a local grassroots branch of an international NGO and you work in that structure with partner organizations in the global north and government partners. It's almost impossible to push back given the power imbalances. I mean, and the relationships are often framed as partnerships, again, to gloss over the inequalities. But they're so strong that it is really hard for grassroots organizations to push back in the context of those relationships, especially given the legitimacy criteria that projects need to meet, i.e., sectoral standards, to time, etc., etc. So, yeah. So the answer is it's difficult. That's the short answer.
Thanks, Femke. I hope Juliana is satisfied with the answer. And also we have another for Juan, and the question is about okay, I'm gonna read it just for the people who can't read the chat now. So Juan, thanks for bringing this case and exhibiting how it challenges the state-driven humanitarian action and neoliberal peace building. But didn't you find as well there might be a distinction between sectors of state or humanitarian actors that might be more accepted and even strategic partners for the San Jose de Apartado peace community?
Juliana, thank you much for the question. And my question will be absolutely yes. I mean, that is what ethnography helps us to do, no? That this is not black and white, no? There are a lot of nuances, no? Ambiguities and all this, no? And certainly, yes. Actually, the community, let's say, at the same time, it declares a rupture with the government side, no? It's actually in ongoing conversation with lawyers, and let's say another strategic, let's say, people inside the state of this, no? And actually, let's start. And we know the theory, the theory of political opportunity, no? Let's say that nowadays, with the progressive Colombian government of Petro, no, there are particular individuals that I'm going to tell the name, no, that are working in the government, no, that actually are very close to the community nowadays, no. I mean, this is everyday life. We choose, we select, we strategize, no, and certainly this shows us that victims are not passive, no, but actually they're also coping, they're also doing strategic and others, no. Just reminded that when this book we talked about politicization and repoliticization, these are not exclusionary camps, no. There are a lot of nuances and a lot of things going on, no. So let's say that for sure, no, when this neoliberal thinking, no, showcase this history of success, no, movements are also using and appropriating those scripts and all this, no? Just to say that there's a lot of gray areas and this is not just black and white. Certainly, I would leave it like that, Juliana. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Juliana also says thank you. And I would like to give the floor to Jose Luis, and maybe in this way we can close our session for today. Jose Luis? If you are able to unmute yourself, I will just unmute you. Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I will put the camera just for respect for you. So I am Jose Luis. I'm been a humanitarian worker in Colombia mainly for the last 25 years. So I have extensive experience here, and I would like to confront some of the affirmations that you have made. Some of them, because they are much more problematic that are portrayed. First of all, when you speak about neoliberal legitimacy, I don't understand what you mean, because sometimes we use words and we need to clarify with specific terms what that it means. And if we relate that with humanitarianism, we should much more include humanitarianism in a social democrat approach that rather than a neoliberal approach, whatever you say. That's one thing, because when we use this kind of neoliberal peacemaking, peace building, it's complex to try to build a conversation on that big words, and we need clear examples. That's one first reaction. The second reaction is that we may disagree that what we call the Western liberal humanitarianism, but the reality is that right now the major donors are liberal Western northern countries, and nor China, nor India, nor Saudi Arabia, no Turkey, no Brazil, no Mexico, and I'm talking of big players with funding, are providing support to other countries, to the people suffering in other countries in amounts enough. So they are not playing, and they are leaving the classical players alone. And the classical players are requesting, I mean, the US, Europe, Japan, Canada, these players from the north, they are claiming that other players, other donors should arrive, and they are not arriving. And to me, that is is contradictory when we talk about the liberal Western northern countries that impose their agenda. Yes, but we want more players on the game. And for example, we are not seeing that. The response for the crisis from the Venezuelan migrants in the continent has been supported mainly, at least in Colombia, maybe not in Brazil. Brazil has a good operation um, taking the migrants, but in the rest of the continent has been supported by Europe and the United States, nor by the local governments. And we are talking about middle upper countries. So that's something for the dilemmas. The other thing is concerning the community of peace of San Jose de Apartado and other peace communities in the Atrato. Well, we could discuss very much that, because that was not an example of humanitarianism. That could you could say that it's an example of human rights, resilience, resistance, taking position, a strong position in the midst of the conflict. And you know, I think that put that in the scenario of the humanitarian, and I've been working there in 1997 and after. I've been working there, and I don't know that. So it's rather much more complex about that, about the human rights organizations that were accompanying the community, and the profile that the accompanying organizations provides to the community, which may be neutral or not, as an external company. So it's much more complex, and I think that it is unfair to place that in a discussion on humanitarian action. It is in other areas much more about democracy, peace building, resilience, human rights, but it's not. And the other thing is that when we complain about the humanitarian sector and we compare with our colleagues working in peace or in human rights, to be honest, the humanitarian sector has been evolving since 1997. Well, I have been evolving since the 40s and 50s, but since 1997, we have been trying to evolve a sphere, people in aid, common humanitarian standards, localization, grand bargain, and we are trying to evolve as a sector. And of course, it's complex, because as the sector is becoming more and more complex, it's much more and more complex to move and to transform. But I think that it is unfair to place many of these things just in with the terms of neoliberal or the colonizing of power balance. To be honest, I think that major donors as ECHO or as DHA and the US, they are trying and they are moving and forcing NGOs to provide more and more direct funding to local actors. And I think that...
Thank you, Jose Luis. Could you wrap up,
okay.
because we need them to react to your comments. Okay. Thank you. And I don't know if Juan of Hemke would like to start and engage with this confrontations.
No, I'm happy to start. No, I basically agree that if funding were grassroots and bottom up, that would remove the global power imbalance. Like if that could be done, that would be fantastic. So I agree with that point. Also, point taken about throwing around the term neoliberal without being more concrete and more accessible. So yeah, points well taken. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say that I think one of the things that the book does is trying to fight or to struggle against the idea of thinking about the humanitarian as separate from the political, separate from the economical, separate from the political and all this, no? So of course, when I'm using the term humanitarian, no, of course, it resonates with the idea that it's just about the humanitarian, no? But I think these organizations that we're thinking here, no, are thinking about suffering, which will be like the classical way of thinking the humanitarian, no? But suffering, but also about development, also about class, also about race, and all these kind of things, no? So I see that the book is trying to think much more the humanitarian, no, as a relation, no? Thinking, for example, what the relation between suffering and, let's say, peace, and let's say like development, and all these kind of things, no? So yes, we are trying to oppose the idea that the humanitarian is simple, is something simple, no? we're trying to move beyond the idea of the triple nexus. No, we're actually saying that the triple nexus is not enough. No, or the gray burden is not enough. We want more and we want more because precisely we're seeing the effects, the ground effects of the consensus in a high level, how they come to the territories, and what are the different effects that we're trying to say. So basically, just to say that we're thinking the humanitarian in a complex way, as you say, no, and they're thinking the humanitarian in relation with development, peace, and that kind of things. So I will leave it like that.
Thank you so much, Femke and Juan. And I think that for the sake of time, we're going to wrap up. And I just want to say that all in all, this book, I couldn't read Camila's questions, but I think that Femke, Juan, and myself could bring this for ourselves. And I would just copy the text, Camila's text, to keep thinking about these reflections. I just want to say that, especially the book, I see as you said in your, well, not you, but Ayesha is gone. Editors in the conclusion said that this book intends to present alternative visions of humanitarianism. And I think this is especially what we have been working throughout the project and many other initiatives like humanitarianism in context and humanitarianism as plural. So we add the S is what we are precisely trying to advocate for. There are many multiple ways of doing this, and we have to look at the diversity of these alternative visions, right? So thanks so much for your time, especially for those who attended today and connected to the Zoom link despite all of the little confusion. But Femke, it's been a pleasure to hear from you and to learn from you. And Juan, of course, we will keep the discussions alive within the observatory and outside. Thanks, Juliana, Jose Luis, and the people at Uni Andes for helping us to set up this meeting. And see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for hosting. Bye.
Take care. Have a good day.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.